unlimited drama series.
I can't invite you to New Year's. My ex will be there and people might talk. My GF said after I can't invite you to New Year's. My ex will be there and people might talk. My GF said after I spent weeks planning a surprise proposal. So I walked away. Few months later, marriage is like a leaky roof. You don't notice the damage until it soaks through the bedroom ceiling and ruins everything you thought was safe. I'm Eddie Parker, 39 years old, and I've spent the last 15 years thinking I had a solid roof over my head. Turns out I was living under a goddamn sieve. It started with the phone calls. Late nights when Jenna would step outside, voice dropping to that honey-sweet whisper she used to save for me. "Just work stuff, Eddie," she'd say, sliding back into bed like nothing happened. But real estate agents don't usually giggle about square footage at midnight. Willow Lake, Maine, isn't the kind of place where secrets stay buried long. This town's got about 3,000 people, and every one of them knows what you had for breakfast before you've finished your coffee. The gossip network here runs faster than the volunteer fire department, and twice as efficient. I should have seen it coming when Jenna started caring about her appearance again. New dresses, expensive perfume, those little black heels she claimed were for client meetings. Right, because nothing says professional real estate agent like stilettos that cost more than my monthly truck payment. "Dad, Mom's acting weird," my daughter Mia said one Thursday evening. She was 14, sharp as a tack, and had inherited my talent for reading people. She keeps checking her phone and smiling at nothing. I was fixing the kitchen sink, again, and paused with my wrench halfway to the pipe. "Weird how? Like, happy weird, but not happy about us." Mia grabbed an apple from the counter, her dark eyes serious. She used to ask about my day. Now she just nods and goes back to texting. Kids notice everything adults think they're hiding. It's like they've got some kind of built-in bullshit detector that gets duller as we age. Mine had apparently gone completely dead somewhere around year 10 of marriage. That night, I watched Jenna get ready for another client dinner. She stood in front of our bedroom mirror, applying lipstick with the kind of care usually reserved for delicate surgery. The red was darker than usual, more dramatic. "Which client?" I asked, leaning against the doorframe. "The Hendersons. They're looking at that lakefront property on Pine Street." She didn't meet my eyes in the mirror. "Could be a big commission." The Hendersons were 80-year-old retirees who went to bed at 9 o'clock sharp. I knew this because Frank Henderson had been my customer for 3 years, and I'd never seen the man awake past sunset. But I just nodded and kissed her cheek, tasting that expensive lipstick and wondering when she'd stopped buying the drugstore brand. "Don't wait up," she said, grabbing her purse. "These things can run late." I spent the evening helping Mia with her algebra homework and trying not to think about where my wife really was. By 10:30, Mia was asleep and I was alone with a beer and the kind of thoughts that eat at a man's insides like acid. The next morning brought Mrs. Harrell, our neighbor, to my workshop behind the house. She was 73 years old and had the observational skills of a private investigator. Nothing happened on Maple Street without her knowledge and subsequent commentary. "Eddie, dear," she said, settling her considerable bulk onto my workbench stool. "I hope you don't mind me saying, but I saw Jenna coming home quite late last night. I kept sanding the cabinet door I was refinishing, not looking up. Client dinner ran long." "Oh, I'm sure it did." Her tone suggested she was sure of no such thing. "That's a lovely car she was in. Very expensive looking. BMW, I think. Metallic blue." My hands stopped moving. Jenna had driven her Honda to dinner. She'd specifically mentioned taking the Honda because it was better on gas. "Must have been someone else," I said. Mrs. Harrell made a non-committal sound. "Perhaps, though it did look an awful lot like her getting out of the passenger side. And that gentleman who walked her to the door was quite handsome, well-dressed." The sanding block slipped from my fingers and clattered to the floor. What time was this? Nearly midnight. I was up with my arthritis, you understand. Couldn't sleep. She leaned forward conspiratorially. The man had his hand on her back, very familiar-like. I picked up the sanding block, my hands steadier than I felt. "Thanks for letting me know, Mrs. Harrell. I'll ask Jenna about it." But I didn't ask Jenna. Instead, I did what any reasonable man would do when his world started tilting sideways. I started paying attention. Really paying attention. The signs were everywhere once I looked. New underwear hidden in the back of her drawer. credit card charges at restaurants I'd never been to, a sudden interest in working late on weekends, and that phone, always face down, always within reach. It was Frank Kowalski who finally gave me the push I needed. Frank was my oldest friend, a retired cop who'd seen enough cheating spouses to write a manual on the subject. We were having beers at Murphy's Tavern when I finally cracked. "She's having an affair," I said, the words tasting like sawdust in my mouth. Frank nodded slowly. "I figured. Question is, what are you going to do about it?" "I don't know. Confront her? Get a lawyer? Or," Frank said, leaning back in his chair, "you could get smart first. Know your enemy before you make your move." He was right. I'd spent my whole marriage being the nice guy, the understanding husband, the man who fixed everyone else's problems while ignoring his own. Maybe it was time to try a different approach. That weekend, while Jenna was at another client showing, I found her second phone. The phone was hidden in her jewelry box, underneath the pearl necklace her mother gave her. A cheap burner phone that looked like something a drug dealer would use. My hands shook as I powered it on, already knowing I didn't want to see what was inside. The text messages painted a picture that made my stomach turn. Months of planning, secret meetings, and intimate details that belonged in a marriage, just not mine. The contact was listed as C, but it didn't take a detective to figure out who that was. Clint Dalton. Slick Clint, as everyone called him behind his back. Mortgage broker, local big shot, and apparently my wife's new favorite hobby. He drove that metallic blue BMW Mrs. Harold had mentioned, wore expensive suits that probably cost more than I made in a month, and had the kind of smooth charm that worked on women who'd forgotten what real substance looked like. The messages went back 4 months. 4 months of "can't wait to see you," and "Eddie's working late again," and detailed plans for weekend getaways I'd never been invited to. There were photos, too. Nothing pornographic, but intimate enough to make me want to put my fist through the bedroom wall. Instead, I carefully photographed everything with my own phone, put the burner back exactly where I'd found it, and went to my workshop to think. This is where I did my best thinking, surrounded by tools and half-finished projects, the smell of wood stain and honest work. I'd built this workshop myself when we bought the house 12 years ago. Every board, every joint, every carefully measured angle. It was the one place that was entirely mine, where I could create something from nothing and know it would last. Unlike my marriage, apparently. The worst part wasn't the betrayal, though that cut deep enough. It was the realization that I'd become invisible in my own life. The reliable husband who fixed the sink and paid the bills and never asked uncomfortable questions. The man who was so easy to fool that his wife didn't even bother being careful about it. "Dad?" Mia's voice came from the workshop doorway. "You okay? You look like someone stole your truck." I managed a smile. "Just thinking about a project. How was school?" She shrugged, leaning against the doorframe the same way I did when I was nervous. "Boring. Mrs. Peterson assigned another essay on what I want to be when I grow up. I'm thinking about writing Not a Liar and seeing what happens. Smart kid. Too smart for her own good sometimes. That might get you detention. Worth it." She studied my face with those sharp eyes. "You sure you're okay? You've been weird lately too." "Just work stress." The lie came easier than it should have. "Nothing for you to worry about." But Mia was already worrying. I could see it in the way she lingered in the doorway, wanting to say something else but not knowing what. 14 was too young to learn that sometimes the people you trust most are the ones who hurt you deepest. That evening, Jenna announced another late night. "Big client from Portland," she said, touching up her makeup in the hallway mirror. "Could be looking at multiple properties." "On a Tuesday night?" I asked. "Rich people keep different hours." She grabbed her purse, the same expensive leather bag that had appeared around the time the affair started. "Don't wait up." After she left, I sat Mia down for a conversation I'd been dreading. "Your mom and I might be having some problems," I said carefully. "Adult problems. But whatever happens, it's not your fault, and it doesn't change how much we both love you." Mia's face went very still. "Are you getting divorced?" I don't know." "Oh, yet, maybe." She was quiet for a long moment. processing this with the serious consideration she gave to everything important. Is Mom seeing someone else? The question hit me like a punch to the gut. What makes you ask that? I'm not stupid, Dad. She's different, happier, but not about us. And she keeps getting texts that make her smile in a way that Mia struggled for the words. In a way, she doesn't smile at your jokes anymore. I pulled her into a hug, this kid who was growing up too fast in a world that kept disappointing her. I'm sorry you have to deal with this. It's not your fault, she said, her voice muffled against my shoulder. But Dad, whatever you decide to do about it, don't let her make you the bad guy. You're the one who's here. You're the one who cares. Smart kid. Smarter than her old man, apparently. The next day, I did something I'd never done in 15 years of marriage. I followed my wife. It felt pathetic and desperate, but I needed to see the truth with my own eyes. Maybe some part of me still hoped I was wrong. I wasn't wrong. Jenna met Clint at Romano's, the nicest restaurant in town. Through the window, I watched them hold hands across the table, watched him lean in to whisper something that made her laugh. She looked happier than I'd seen her in years, relaxed, alive. They left together in his BMW, and I followed at a distance to his lake house on the North Shore. It was a sprawling place with floor-to-ceiling windows and a dock that probably cost more than my annual salary. The kind of house Jenna had always dreamed of living in. I parked down the road and watched the lights come on inside. Watched shadows move past the windows. Watched my marriage officially die in a house I could never afford to build. The drive home took forever, and no time at all. I sat in my truck in the driveway, staring at the modest two-story house we'd bought when Mia was little. It needed paint. The gutters were sagging. The front steps had a loose board I kept meaning to fix. It wasn't a lake house with $1 million view, but it was home. Or it had been. Inside, I poured myself 3 fingers of whiskey and sat at the kitchen table, thinking, planning. The old Eddie would have confronted Jenna, demanded explanations, maybe begged her to end it. The old Eddie would have tried to save a marriage that was already dead. But the old Eddie was gone, buried somewhere between the burner phone and watching his wife hold another man's hand. The new Eddie was going to be smarter, harder, and a hell of a lot less forgiving. I raised my glass to the empty kitchen. Here's to new beginnings, I said to no one, and to making sure everyone gets exactly what they deserve. The whiskey burned going down, but not as much as the truth had. Frank Kowalski had seen this movie before. 30 years as a cop in a small town meant he'd witnessed every variation of human stupidity and betrayal. When I showed up at his house the next morning with photos of Jenna and Clint, he just nodded and poured 2 cups of coffee. So what's the plan? He asked, settling his bulk into a kitchen chair that creaked under his weight. I don't have one yet. That's why I'm here. Frank studied the photos on his phone, his weathered face impassive. You could go the traditional route. Lawyer up, file for divorce, try to get custody and a decent settlement. And Slick Clint's got money and connections. He'll make sure Jenna gets the best attorney in the state. You'll be lucky to keep your truck. I'd already thought of that. Clint Dalton wasn't just wealthy. He was connected. His mortgage business had tentacles throughout the county, and he'd made friends with everyone who mattered. Judges, lawyers, city council members, the kind of network that could make life very difficult for a working-class handyman who didn't know the right people. There's another way, Frank said, leaning back in his chair. But it requires patience, and getting your hands a little dirty. I'm listening. First rule of warfare. Know your enemy's weaknesses. Clint Dalton's got an ego the size of Texas, and a reputation he's spent years building. Men like that, their image is everything. Take that away, and you take away their power. Frank was right. Clint's whole business model depended on trust and respectability. He sold himself as the reliable local expert, the man who'd get you the best deal on your dream home. His affair with a married woman wouldn't exactly fit that image. What about Jenna? I asked. Same principle. She's built her real estate career on being the wholesome family woman. Soccer mom who understands what families need. Hard to sell that image when everyone knows you're screwing around on your husband. It was a cold way to look at it, but Frank was right. In a small town like Willow Lake, reputation was currency. Lose that, and you lost everything else that mattered. So what's step 1? Frank grinned, and for a moment I could see the cop he used to be. We gather intelligence, document everything, build a case that'll destroy them both when the time is right. That sounds like a lot of work. Good things always are. But Eddie, when we're done, they won't just lose. They'll be too busy putting out fires to cause you any trouble in divorce court. I spent the next week becoming a student of my wife's affair. I installed a GPS tracker on her car. Nothing illegal, since my name was on the title. I photographed her comings and goings. I documented every lie, every fake client meeting, every time she claimed to be somewhere she wasn't. The pattern was depressingly predictable. Tuesday and Thursday evenings at Romano's, followed by visits to Clint's lake house. Saturday afternoons at the Marriott in Augusta when they wanted privacy. Sunday mornings at a little cafe in Camden while I was home making breakfast for Mia. But it wasn't just about gathering evidence. I was learning who they really were when they thought no one was watching. And what I learned made my blood boil. They weren't just having an affair, they were having fun at my expense. Text messages joking about my pathetic attempts to fix things around the house. Photos of expensive dinners with captions like Eddie's buying, because technically, Jenna was using our joint credit card. Plans for a romantic New Year's getaway to the Bahamas that I was unknowingly financing.
90 days of calls to the same number. You bought a burner for her.
Give it to me.
One reason not to drop it.
Watch more on Grammarly.com.
The worst part was a conversation I overheard when Jenna thought I was in the shower. She was on the phone with her friend Ruby, laughing about something Clint had said. He calls Eddie the handyman, she giggled, like he's the hired help instead of my husband. God, I can't believe I wasted so many years with someone so ordinary. Ordinary. 15 years of marriage. And that's what I'd become to her. The ordinary man who fixed her problems and paid her bills while she played house with someone more exciting. That night, I made a decision that would have horrified the old Eddie. I was going to destroy them both. Not with violence. I wasn't that kind of man. But with something worse than violence. Public humiliation and social ruin. In a town like Willow Lake, there were fates worse than death. Being exposed as a liar and a cheat was one of them. The first shot I fired was small but effective. Clint's pride and joy was that BMW, a pristine M5, that he washed and waxed religiously. He parked it in the same spot outside his office every day, where everyone could see it and admire his success. On a cold Thursday morning, while he was inside schmoozing potential clients, I paid his car a visit. Nothing dramatic, just a handful of bird seeds scattered on the roof and hood. By afternoon, every seagull and pigeon in town had discovered the feast. By evening, the BMW looked like it had been carpet-bombed by angry birds. Clint spent an hour in the parking lot, with a bucket and sponge, cursing and scrubbing, while half the town watched from Murphy's Tavern across the street. His expensive suit was soaked, his perfect hair was disheveled, and his legendary cool was nowhere to be found. Heard Slick Clint had some car trouble, Frank said when I stopped by that evening. Really? That's too bad. Funny thing about bird shit, Frank mused. The more you scrub, the more it seems to spread around. It was a small victory, but it felt good. For the first time in months, I went to sleep smiling. The next phase required more finesse. Clint's mortgage business depended on referrals and word-of-mouth recommendations. People trusted him with the biggest financial decision of their lives. That trust was about to become a liability. I started small, anonymous tips to the State Banking Commission about some of Clint's more questionable practices. Nothing illegal, but enough to trigger an audit that would tie up his business for months. I also reached out to a few former clients who'd had problems with their loans, encouraging them to file complaints with the Better Business Bureau. Within 2 weeks, Clint was spending more time dealing with investigators than making deals. His stress showed in everything from his appearance to his temper. The smooth charm was cracking, revealing the petty, arrogant man underneath, but the real masterstroke was yet to come. The annual Willow Lake Winter Festival was the social event of the year. 3 days of ice fishing contests, craft fairs, and enough small-town politics to fill a soap opera. Everyone who was anyone showed up to see and be seen. It was the perfect stage for the next act of my revenge. Jenna had volunteered to help with the real estate booth, selling raffle tickets and schmoozing potential clients. She'd been looking forward to it for weeks, seeing it as a chance to network and build her business. She had no idea she was about to become the main attraction. I spent the morning of the festival making final preparations. The anonymous email account was set up. The photos were selected and edited. The mailing list included every major gossip in town, plus a few key business leaders for good measure. The subject line was simple. Thought you should know. The email contained a dozen carefully chosen photos of Jenna and Clint together, along with timestamps showing when they were taken. Nothing pornographic or inappropriate, just clear evidence of an ongoing affair. The message was brief and to the point. These photos were taken over the past 2 months. I thought the community should know what kind of people they're doing business with. A concerned citizen. I sent it at noon, just as the festival was hitting full swing. Within an hour, the photos had been forwarded to half the town. By 2 o'clock, they'd been posted on the Willow Lake Community Facebook page. By 3, they were the only thing anyone was talking about. I watched from across the festival grounds as the news spread through the crowd like wildfire. People huddled around phones, whispering and pointing. The looks directed at Jenna's booth grew increasingly hostile. Several potential clients walked away mid-conversation when they recognized her. Ruby and Tessa, Jenna's closest friends and fellow gossips, abandoned the booth entirely when the social media posts started appearing. I watched them scurry away like rats from a sinking ship, already distancing themselves from the scandal. Jenna tried to maintain her composure, but I could see the panic in her eyes as more and more people avoided her booth. She kept checking her phone, watching her social world collapse in real time. The coup de grace came when Mrs. Henderson, the 80-year-old client Jenna had supposedly been meeting for dinner, approached the booth with fire in her eyes. "Young lady," Mrs. Henderson said in a voice that carried across half the festival, "I want you to know that my husband and I have never met with you for dinner. Not once. We eat at home every night and go to bed at 9 o'clock, as any decent person should." The crowd around the booth had grown, drawn by the drama like moths to a flame. Jenna's face went white as she realized the implications. "Mrs. Henderson, I think there's been some confusion." "The only confusion," the old woman interrupted, "is how you thought you could use our name to cover up your shameful behavior. We'll be finding a new real estate agent. Thank you very much. One with some morals." The crowd murmured approval as Mrs. Henderson walked away with her dignity intact. Jenna stood alone behind her booth, surrounded by hostile faces and uncomfortable silence. That's when Clint made his entrance, pushing through the crowd with his usual arrogance intact. He hadn't seen the photos yet, hadn't realized that his secret was now public knowledge. He walked up to Jenna's booth with a confident smile, completely oblivious to the social minefield he was entering. "Hey, beautiful," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "How's business?" The crowd went dead silent. Every phone in the vicinity came up to record what happened next. Jenna's eyes went wide with horror as she realized what was about to happen. "Clint," she whispered urgently, "you need to leave. Now." But it was too late. Someone in the crowd had already called out, "Hey Clint, where's your wife?" That's when he finally noticed the phones, the hostile faces, the way people were backing away from them both. His confident smile faltered as the reality of the situation sank in. "What's going on?" he demanded. "Check Facebook," someone called out. "You're famous." I watched from my position near the hot chocolate stand as Clint pulled out his phone and saw the photos for the first time. His face went through a fascinating series of expressions: confusion, recognition, and finally, pure rage. "Who did this?" he shouted, looking around the crowd for someone to blame. "This is a private matter." "Not anymore," came a voice from the back of the crowd. "Whole town knows now." That's when Clint spotted me. I was leaning against a festival booth, sipping hot chocolate and watching the show with obvious satisfaction. Our eyes met across the crowd, and I raised my cup in a mock toast. He came at me like a charging bull, pushing through the crowd with murder in his eyes. But I'd been expecting this. I'd been hoping for it. "You son of a bitch," he snarled, grabbing the front of my jacket. "You did this." "Did what?" I asked calmly, making sure my voice carried to the crowd that had followed him. "Take photos of you and my wife?" "No, Clint. You did that all by yourselves." He drew back his fist, and I could see the exact moment when he realized his mistake. 50 people with phones were recording every second of this confrontation. If he threw that punch, it wouldn't just be assault. It would be assault caught on video and shared across social media within minutes. His hand dropped to his side, but his face was still twisted with rage. "This isn't over," he said. "You're right," I replied, loud enough for everyone to hear. "It's not over. It's just getting started." The crowd parted as I walked away, leaving Clint and Jenna to face the music alone. Behind me, I could hear the murmur of conversation starting up again, the excited chatter of people who just witnessed the social event of the decade. By evening, both Clint and Jenna had left the festival. The photos had been shared hundreds of times. The Willow Lake Community Facebook page was on fire with comments ranging from outraged to gleeful. Several of Clint's clients had already called to cancel appointments. I went home to find Mia waiting for me in the kitchen. Her laptop open to the Facebook page. "Dad," she said, looking up at me with something that might have been pride. "I think you broke the internet." "Just a little," I admitted. She closed the laptop and gave me a hug. "Good," she said fiercely. "They deserved it." Well, smart kid. She definitely got that from me. The week after the festival was chaos. Jenna moved out of the house and into a motel, claiming she needed space to think. Clint's mortgage business was hemorrhaging clients. The state banking commission had expanded their investigation based on anonymous tips from concerned citizens. Both of their reputations were in ruins, but they weren't done fighting. On Thursday night, I was in my workshop finishing a cabinet repair when I heard glass breaking. I grabbed a flashlight and headed outside to find my truck's windshield spiderwebbed and a brick lying on the ground nearby. The message was clear. They knew I was responsible for their downfall, and they were escalating. I called Frank, who arrived within 20 minutes carrying a thermos of coffee and a grim expression. "This is just the beginning," he said, examining the damage. "Cornered animals get desperate." "Let them come," I said. "I'm ready. Are you? Because desperate people do desperate things. And you've got Mia to think about." He was right. I'd been so focused on revenge that I hadn't considered the possibility of retaliation. Clint Dalton was used to getting his way, and I'd just spent 2 weeks systematically destroying everything he'd built. A broken windshield might be just the opening shot. Friday evening brought the escalation I'd been expecting. Jenna showed up at the house while I was making dinner for Mia, her eyes red-rimmed and desperate. "We need to talk," she said, pushing past me into the kitchen. "Mom!" Mia jumped up from the table where she'd been doing homework. "Are you coming home?" Jenna's face softened for a moment as she looked at our daughter. "Maybe, baby. Your dad and I need to work some things out first." I sent Mia upstairs and turned to face my wife. She looked terrible. Her hair was unwashed, her makeup was smeared, and she was wearing the same clothes she'd had on yesterday. "You destroyed my life," she said without preamble. "I documented your choices," I corrected. "You destroyed your own life. Those photos were private. You were in public places, with my credit cards paying for your romantic dinners." I leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed. "Tell me, Jenna, which part bothers you more? Getting caught or losing your meal ticket?" Her face twisted with rage. "You think you're so smart, don't you? The poor, wronged husband getting his revenge. But you have no idea what you've done. Enlighten me. Clint's not going to let this go. He's lost everything because of you. His business, his reputation, his marriage. Men like him don't just walk away." "Is that a threat?" "It's a warning. He's talking about making you pay, really pay." I straightened up, suddenly alert. "What kind of pay?" "The kind that involves you having an accident, or maybe Mia having problems at school, or this house burning down while you sleep." The blood in my veins turned to ice water. Threatening me was one thing, but bringing my daughter into it crossed a line I hadn't even known existed. "If he touches one hair on Mia's head, then what?" Jenna stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "What are you going to do, Eddie? You're a handyman from nowhere. He has connections you can't even imagine." "We'll see about that." She studied my face, looking for cracks in my resolve. "There's a way out of this, for all of us. I'm listening. You back off. Stop the anonymous tips, stop the social media campaign, stop whatever else you have planned. Let us rebuild our lives in peace. And in return, I'll give you the divorce. You can keep the house, have primary custody of Mia. I'll even throw in some alimony if it makes you feel better." It was a generous offer, considering her position. Too generous. There had to be a catch. "What's the real deal, Jenna?" Her mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the calculation underneath. "Clint has a job opportunity in Florida. A fresh start where nobody knows about this situation. We leave town. You never see us again. Everybody wins. Except for the part where you both get away with it." "We're not getting away with anything. Our lives are ruined here. Isn't that enough revenge for you?" I pretended to consider it, watching her hope build in her eyes. Then I smiled, the cold, predatory smile I'd been practicing in the mirror. "No," I said simply. "It's not nearly enough." Her face went white. "Eddie, please. Think about Mia. Think about what's best for her." "I am thinking about her. I'm thinking about the lessons she'll learn if I let you two walk away from this. I'm thinking about what kind of man she'll think her father is if I back down now." "You're making a mistake. The only mistake I made was trusting you in the first place." She left without another word, but I could see the defeat in her shoulders. The negotiation phase was over. Now came the war. Ugh. I called Frank as soon as she was gone. "They threatened Mia," I said without preamble. "Son of a bitch." Frank's voice went hard. "That changes things." "Yeah, it does. Time to finish this. What do you need?" "Everything you've got on Clint Dalton. Every dirty deal, every corner he's cut, every enemy he's made. I want enough ammunition to bury him so deep he'll never dig his way out. And that's going to take some time. We don't have time. He's planning something, and I'm not going to sit around waiting for it to happen." Frank was quiet for a moment. "There might be another way, faster, but riskier." "Tell me." "We make him come to us, on our terms, where we control the situation." "How?" "We give him what he wants most, a chance to get even, but we make sure he hangs himself in the process." Nah. It was a dangerous plan, but it was better than waiting for Clint to make the first move. We spent the next hour working out the details, and by the time Frank left, I knew exactly what I had to do. The bait was simple: an anonymous message to Clint claiming I had more photos, more evidence of his business dealings, and was planning to release everything unless he paid me $50,000. The meeting would be at my workshop, late Sunday night when the neighborhood was asleep. Of course, there was no blackmail material, and I didn't want his money. What I wanted was to get him on my property, threatening me, while Frank recorded everything from his position in the woods behind the workshop. Sunday night came with a cold rain that turned the ground muddy and made visibility poor. Perfect weather for what I had planned. Clint arrived at 11:30, parking his BMW at